I'm William Rader. I'm from Artisan Tarot. Sadly, Kristen can't be with us right now because she's over in Europe and it's about 2 a.m. her time. So I think she's catching some Z's right now. But I'm William Rader, the co-founder of the company. And as you all know, we've got a Kickstarter running right now, Kickstarter campaign. And thanks to all of you, we've well exceeded our goal. So thank you so much. I think the last time I checked, we were at $21,000 raised, and that will cover the cost of the a full run of the deck, the cotton cloth, and all of those stretch goals, plus that beautiful Bolivian rosewood box that you see there on the Kickstarter page as well. So a little bit about us. We started this company 2 years ago. It's more than that, but we really started working on the cards 2.5 years ago. And we decided to do the majors only deck first, only the major cards, and you can actually see a sample of those right here. So this is our first revision of the cards. We created this really funky back to try to just modernize this deck just a little bit. But this was our first rendition of the cards, and everybody really liked the quality of the cards, the style of the cards. And so Kristen and I decided to produce the full deck of the Nicolas Conver Tarot. And here we have right here, this is what the full deck looks like. Now, I will say that my hands are quite large, so it might look small, but this is actually a standard size tarot deck, believe it or not. So let's just open up this right here. So we have Nicolas Conver, as you can see right here on the box, and hopefully these don't go everywhere. So here we have them. And this is going to be the same finish. We print these with Shuffle Ink down in Florida. This is going to have the same finish as our majors only deck. So if you got that deck and you like the stock, it's the same exact stock. And you can see they just slide really easily, you know, between the hands. Also, we'll just show off a few cards here. Here we have the Empress, the Chariot, and you can see these are all French. So this deck will only be in French, unlike our majors. This is the card with no name. Unlike the majors deck, which was in English and in French, we've decided to go with the French deck to make it a little bit more true to the TDM tradition. And so here we have the coins. And you can just see they're very vibrant in color. They really, really stand out. And I think they're going to make your readings that much more powerful, right? Because of just the beauty of these cards. I'm going to put them down before they spill out everywhere. So with that in mind, we're going to just show you right now some of the original cards from the Nicolas Conver deck and some other revisions, so you can kind of compare ours with a few others. But before I do that, a lot of people ask us, you know, why the Nicolas Conver Tarot? Why did you decide to do this deck as your first restoration? And that's because I think the Nicolas Conver deck is a very prominent point in history, because this deck was kind of like the writer deck of the time. It was probably the most popular deck in France, and it was copied year after year after year after year after year. And so you can see this deck was from 1760, and you can see how people replicate this deck in the 1800s and even the 1900s as this deck gained in popularity. And so that's why we decided to use do the Nicolas Conver deck as our first restoration, just because of that history that's behind it. Also, as you probably are aware, Jodorowsky has a lot of work with the Nicolas Conver deck. The CBD Tarot is also very popular. So there's lots of literature behind this deck to support that. If someone's getting really into the TDM, the Tarot de Marseille deck, and they don't know really where to start, there's lots of material out there for people to start to learn with this deck. And so that's, once again, another reason why we decided to have this deck be our first restoration. So let's pop into, I'll share my screen here. Hopefully everybody can see this. And here we have 4 cards, and these are going to be the same every single time that we go through these cards. On the left, we have a original copy of the Tarot de Marseille deck, and you can find these in various museums around the world. This one's from the National Library of France. That's what this one is from the left here. We have our restoration here beside that to the right, followed by the CBD deck by Yav Bendov. and then we have the Jodorowsky deck to the right of that. So you can see immediately different variations in these images. So let's talk about that. For example, the first thing to note is that we've expanded the cards. What that means is if you look at the edges here, do you see where the wings of the bird is cut off? You can see where the angel's wing is cut off. What we've done is we've redrawn this to a standard tarot card size. So you can see we've expanded the wing, we've expanded the angel's wing, we've completed the drawing on this lion here. And then the bull, well, we didn't have to do anything because he was already drawn all the way. But you can see here that there's more of this image that you can see, which just gives it a little bit more breathing room when you're reading with these cards. Now, another example here would be this hand of the angel. We think by looking at this, this does look like a little hand. You can kind of make it out right here. I just outlined it for us. We put it in right here, her hand. And you can see the CBD deck just left it, didn't put her hand in here. And Jodorowsky decided to put in a hand. And he also decided to change the green color to the blue color. Right? And you can see some differences already just by looking at this angel. Now going down, you can see this hand is really messed up, if you all can see that. And what we've done is we've tried to look at what she might be holding, what might be in her hand. And this is what we came up with, which was as close as possible to what we think we see it's going on here. So it could be a little vase of some sort. CBD left this original. And then here in the Jodorowsky deck, you can see he's completely redrawn this area for, and added this vase here. So this is one of the differences just in this card between the hands, and you can see each one is actually different, but well, besides the CBD, which is very, very similar. Now, another thing to note is, the world, this is, card 21, the last card in the tarot. And you can see sometimes this is like the final transformation, right? The end of the series. And here we've got in the original, she's got this handkerchief that's draping across her body. Here we have it green, and then it's red. And then in the CBD, we've got the green and the red. With the Jodorowsky, he went with blue and then red. What we've done is we've made this a little bit more of a pattern. So this green now flows into this red. And whenever I read this card, I see like a transformation taking, it doesn't happen overnight. This is a transition that happens much slower, right? And so we tried to reflect this in the way that I read the cards by showing this slow transformation from this green cloth to this red cloth, because she's completed that whole journey, right, of all of the cards in the major arcana. And so that's just a creative decision that we've made, which still shows the green and the red, but that slow process of that transformation. And then another notable change is you can see how we've got little strawberries down here. We've removed that red from our deck. And the reason why is looking back into history of like Noble, Dodal, and other decks, this area was not ever colored red. So whatever reason, whenever this deck was created, they colored this red. So we went back to the original and said, hey, let's leave this the color of the animals, which makes a little bit more sense to the eye, instead of saying, why are there strawberry looking things down here? And once again, this was just a creative decision on our part that we backed up with the history of this deck. So let's go to the next slide here. Here we have the Wheel of Fortune. And on this card, pardon me, some changes that we've made. First is if you look at the wheel, you can see where this stick stops. And it's almost as if you look through this wheel and there's absolutely nothing holding the other side of the wheel. What we've done is we've recreated the back side of the wheel, put in the cog, put in the stick through the cog, so it now makes the connection so this wheel can now turn. And you can see the CBD deck doesn't have this, neither does the Jodorowsky deck. And so we've recreated this entire area. So when you look at this card, it now makes sense. And I think what you'll find interesting, if you go back and look at other editions, your mind is now going to see that something looks like it's missing. And that's because it is missing. And so once again, looking back at other historic decks, we can see that these are actually present. And so whatever reason, the woodblock cutter, the creator of this deck, left this out. So we've added this back in because we've got Illustrator, we can do that. Also, if you see this little guy's hand is really messed up, it's messed up here and it's still messed up here. We've gone ahead and we've fixed this area on the card and given him a proper leg. Also, you can see the tails. The tails are now coming out of the correct spot on the animal's body. So you can see this is kind of coming out of the side. If you look here, this tail is coming out of this little guy's back. So we've stuck this to his booty, exactly where if he was a rabbit or whatever this animal might be, we've put this in the proper place. And that's the same thing for the armor. You can see this looks like this little guy's wearing some armor, and he's got this little collar that's going over his ears. So what we've done is we've put that collar behind his ears and colored in his armor. And what really makes this apparent now when you're reading the cards, if you put these three characters together, you have a complete outfit, right? So you've got the skirt of the guy, you've got the top armor piece with the little, the backside, and then you have the robe, the sword, and the crown. So these three people together all create that complete outfit and that complete image. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Now going further, you can see that we have created some color changes. So we've made the towels blue, for example. The sword, we've given this handle, we've made this red. We've just tried to fill out some of these details so that when you look at this image is complete and consistent with the other cards in the deck. So let's go to the next card here. Here we have the Popus. And here we have, once again, the changes on this one are a little bit more subtle, but what I want to show you is the color changes that we've made on this card. For instance, if you look at the original deck, if you look at her robe that's flowing down her body, you have this light blue robe, the red robe, the dark blue happening, and it's really hard for your eyes to be able to make sense of really what's happening here. And so we spent literally hours and hours and hours on this card trying to understand what was happening. And you can see what we've came up with. We've come up with her inner dress is this blue color, which is why that's always also shown here at the bottom, because she's got this robe that flows down. And then she's got this beautiful outer robe that's going across her body and is being folded up upon her lap. And so hopefully by looking at this card, you can see immediately what's happening. Well, if you look here, you can see that they've left this coloring the same. And if you go to the Jodorowsky deck, they've also left it very, very similar. But what's really interesting in this is Jodorowsky put an egg behind her. And this, she says, this is the form of the symbol of fertility with the Popus. And you can see here, they've added this egg for whatever reason. And with the Jodorowsky deck, if you've got it, I hear it's out of print right now. So if you can find a copy, that you might want to. But Jodorowsky put little eggs throughout the majors. And so it's kind of a fun Easter egg hunt, a little bonus with what you get with his deck. But for whatever reason, you can see it's not here in the original, but he's decided to add it in here for whatever reason. All right, let's continue. Here we have the Hermit, and this is probably one of the cards that we made the most changes on. You can see here in the original, you've got this blue sleeve that's coming down, yet this sleeve is red. You have this red cloak coming down and around, but the rest of his cloak is blue. And a lot of these colors just don't really make sense to your eye. You have the inside of his robe being tan, but the outside being blue, which also doesn't really make sense to the eye. So what we've done is we've completely recolored this entire character to try to make him look a little bit more like a hermit, someone who doesn't have a lot of wealth, who doesn't have a lot of colors in his outfit. And if you look at other historic decks during this time period, you'll see that they tend to be more of one color or two colors or three colors more than what we see here in the Conver. And once again, in the CBD, you can see they primarily left it the same. And what Jodorowsky did is he actually put like this blue hand, gave him a blue hand, which also doesn't show in the original. And what we did, CBD didn't do, or the original didn't do. And so you can see here immediately some changes between these four cards. And once again, looking at other historic decks, trying to figure out what the Hermit might look like, that's why we went with this. Also, just an interesting note, we did update one thing on this card. If you see his robe that's flowing down his body, you can see where this goes just over his shoulder right here. But you can see where this one comes and he meets right here. So what we've done is we've redrawn this line to meet at his chest. That way this looks more like a cloak running off of his body. And of course you can still see the original line that's supposed to be right here. So all we've added is this little triangle to just make that connect. And just to our eyes, it just makes a lot more sense when you now look at this. All right, now we're gonna move forward here to the miners. So these are all brand new. This is a brand new thing for us working with these miners. And once again, we've changed little details like this throughout the images to try to keep them all consistent. So for example, on the King of Coins, you can see he's sitting in his chair. Right now, he's kind of floating here out in space because he doesn't have any back legs or side legs to this chair. So we've added those in right here. You can see on the King of Batons where this skirt goes around his body and then it just stops suddenly. What we've done is we've recreated the entire skirt so it runs all around his waist and around his legs. So it's small details like this that I think really matter when you're looking at these cards, because you don't have your sitter going, well, what's happening here and what's going on here? Because this image is now very clear for them. And you can also see on the seat, we made the whole seat this red color. And this wasn't just like happenstance, let's make this red. No, what we did is we looked at behind his elbow on this armrest, that's red. The back of him, this area is red on the chair. So we decided, okay, let's color the whole thing red. That makes him pop out just a little bit more than what you see here in the original. So let's go on to the queens. Here we've got the queens. Once again, some changes here. For example, on the Queen of Batons, you can see this flowing down her body. What we've done is we've created this and made this her robe. So her robe is coming around, coming up, and she's now holding onto her robe. Once again, not major changes, but just enough where we think it catches your eye and you go, oh, I know exactly what's going on here. That's the same thing for the Queen of Swords. You can see her dress is kind of colored very oddly. So what we've done is we've created her dress to be all red, which now flows and makes more sense to our eye. And we've recolored this area of her body as well. Once again, trying to make that more sense for your eyes. So let's go on here to the knights. Once again, not major changes, but a lot of changes in the colors. But you can see, for example, here on this guy's face, he doesn't have a face. What happened? And so this is where we had to do a lot of research among many additions to try to figure out what this guy's face would look like. And so we found another addition and we said, okay, this is what it looks like. And then we added this here. So this was not just, copying one deck and saying, okay, we're done. This was like, many decks and comparing them, contrasting them, trying to figure out what's going on in these. And that's the same thing with the horse. You can see the horse's, I guess, this little gown here, this throw, goes from tan and then it goes to blue here. We've just made this all tan. Once again, hopefully this making more sense to our eyes. Here we have the pages. Once again, mainly a lot of color differences. For example, this guy's the Page of Cups. You can see he's got kind of like the Joseph and the coat of many colors going on. So what we've done is we've just made this a little bit more monotone so that your eye, once again, can easily track that. And then here's an interesting note. The Page of Swords is the only character in all of the tarot, at least the Nicolas Conver tarot, that has this kind of like tannish blonde hair. If you go through all of the other cards, all of the other characters either have blonde hair or another color. And this is the only character with this like kind of tan hair that's flowing down. And we think that's really interesting. And we decided to keep that because I think that does stand out. Okay, let's go to the cups here. The Ace of Cups, the coins, the batons, and the swords, but specifically with the cup, you can see the perspective is just a little bit off with this cup here at the top. You can see how these towers kind of run into each other and these lines. You can see how they're at kind of odd angles at each other. And what Kristen has done is she's completely redrawn this to make that perspective correct. And so this took a lot of time on her part to completely change that perspective. And now you can flow and you can see how these lines flow into one another and how everything now looks like perfect for your eyes. Where this one, it's like, well, how does this one go in this way? And like, what's going, this tower meets up with this tower. So once again, we have tried to just make this consistent and more appealing for your eyes. Now, that we're into the minors, this is actually an interesting note. You can see this lime green color in the aces. You can see this lime green right here on the ace of coins. You can see this lime green on the ace of cups. This lime green color only shows up 5 times within the majors. It shows up on the ace of coins, the 2 of coins, the ace of cups, the 2 of cups, and then it shows up on the, I believe, the 5 of wands, which I'll show you here in a moment. So on those 5 cards is the only time this lime green color shows up. And so this is the type of stuff you begin to find out once you start restoring these images, and you try to figure out what's going on within the cards. So let's go to the minors here. So here we have that lime green here in the 2 of coins. And when we're looking at these, I just want you to notice how every single coin is completely different. Every single flower is completely different. This is not just a copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, because some decks do that. A lot of minimal decks or other decks do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. We just feel that the Nicolas Conver Tarot has so much character in it that we wanted to keep that character and keep those flowing lines. So you can see where this coin is different from this one, right? These little semicircles are much wider. On this one, they're much smaller. And this is the same throughout every single coin. Each one is different. No 2 are the same. And let's go ahead and go to the 2 of cups. Here's that lime green again on the 2 of cups. You can see every single cup is going to be different from each other. And what I really love about the Nicolas Conver deck is a lot of elements are taken from each other. So you have a lot of elements in the majors that are then replicated in other majors. And so maybe an element like, for example, the Fool's stick is the same stick that's in the Hermit. And so you can see a lot of these elements going from one card to another card. So here, for example, you've got this flower on the brim. I guess that's what we're saying now, Marilyn. The top of the cup, maybe the lid. We've got this flower here on the top. And this flower, if we go back to the coins, you can see this flower is right here from the 2 of coins. And so you can see, if you've got a reading and you've got maybe a coin here with the flower, now there's some similarities going across from the 2 of coins and now to the 10 of cups, right? Because you have these images that are now seen across 2 cards. And what does that mean for your readings, right? Because all of these details really matter. All right, let's go to the wands here. And here you have, I'm sorry, I was mistaken. It's yeah, so let's go to the batons here. So here we've got, once again, every single flower is different from one another. Every single one, and every single wand is different from one another. And so you can see in some of these how, for example, this flower right here is going to be different from this flower that's down here. So let's go again. Here we have these swords. Once again, every single sword is different. Every single flower is different. You get the point. But what's really cool, and this is a pattern that we found within these regarding the lattice work. If you look at the lattice work here, you can see up here at the top, you've got the yellow and then you have red. The one next to it now goes red, yellow. The next one to that one now goes yellow, red, red, yellow, yellow, red, red, yellow, yellow, red, red, yellow, yellow, red. And so you can see this beautiful pattern that goes as you go through the cards. You can see the odd cards have, well, I guess the even cards have the yellow, the odd cards have this beautiful red. And for whatever reason, these are alternating throughout the cards. Was this on purpose? Was it a mistake? Who knows? But we do find that this is interesting to find these patterns that are happening throughout the cards. Okay, so here are the majors, all of the updates that you can see. If you've got the original decks in hand, our majors only edition, you can hold those up and you can kind of look at some of these differences. Once again, I'm just going to point a few of them out if you do have our majors deck. The leg right here of the Fool, we've changed this from that green color to the tan color because this is his body. So we've changed that color here. On Le Bateleur, for example, this used to have 2 circles at the top and bottom of the wand. We've gotten rid of this top one because the perspective doesn't make sense because this is the bottom. You shouldn't be able to see it up here at the top. We already talked about the Popus, mainly changing the colors here. L'Impératrice, we've on the Empress, we've recolored some of her throne that she's sitting on, just so it makes more sense to your eyes. With the Emperor, we've changed his beard a little bit from the first one. Also, we rebuilt the entire back of his chair. So if you do have like the CBD deck or something like that, the card, because it's narrower, cuts off this entire back part of the chair. We've redrawn that, and we actually looked through hundreds and hundreds of photos of chairs. That was a fun day, seeing how many vintage chairs we could look at. But we looked here and we determined this is probably what that would look like during the time. So that's what we've created. And I think by looking at this, you would never know that we've completely redrawn the back of this chair. Here we have the Pope. We've recolored some of his robe that's draping down his body. You can now more easily tell that there's two characters down here, one with their hand raised, one down. So we've made some changes in this area. With the lover, we've, I think, changed a few colors here on their bodies, maybe on the robe. And also, actually, I'm going to go to this card because this took us a long time to figure out. So if you look here, on the original one, this is kind of a mess what's happening right here. Behind this cherub's leg. But what we finally figured out, Kristen figured out after probably 3 hours of studying this, is that this satchel for the arrows go behind his body, and this little piece right here is that satchel that's holding the arrows. And this took us literally 3-4 hours, like over the course of several days, to what is going on here? What is going on here? What is going on here? And finally, that's what we've figured out. And now when you look at it, you go, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. Why did it take you so long? But the reality is, when you look at these, it really does take a lot of time to try to decipher what's happening. We've also added these flowers, colored the flowers in her hair, which aren't colored in the original and some other decks. Here are the chariot. Once again, we've rebuilt the horse's legs. We've also, you wouldn't notice this, but we've also centered the chariot in the frame. We've redrawn these curtains. We've redrawn these ties here at the top. The wheels themselves, we've completely redrawn. So now these are more elegant to look at. And if you've got the CBD deck, or if you're familiar with this deck, you're immediately going to see the differences, especially here with the legs and the wheels and these curtains. Same thing for Justice. Once again, recoloring her skirt, making this actually connect and go through her hand. Being able to see through this area right here, because on some decks that's all light blue, especially in the original. The Hermit we talked about, the Wheel of Fortune we talked about, Strength we talked about. As you can see, this area comes right here down. And actually, I'm going to stop showing my screen because this is actually a note that I want to talk about, just some of the differences again. You can see how her robe drapes off of her body right here. And here, it doesn't. So this is what it looks like in the original deck. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so you can all see me again. But I would just want to show you a real life example of an update. And we're going to just find her here so you can see the type of change that we make on this real card. So that was version 1. And here's version 2. And you can see here now how this robe isn't going on the inside of her body. It's now draping around to the outside of her body, which is how she would wear this. And so this is, like I said, when you get your deck, this is what it's going to look like with this update. We do have some major decks still available. So if you prefer the way that it looks in that deck, we've got a few available, not a lot. But on the updates, this is now what it looks like. So I want to take a moment and just open this up to some questions. If anybody has any questions, about this restoration process, about some of the things that we talked about, I will be happy to share, and if I don't know the answer, maybe someone else does. But I'm happy to share about, kind of about our process, the way that we thought when we were creating this deck. Or if you have any questions about the Kickstarter, running the Kickstarter, really anything at all, I'm happy to, just open this up and answer them. Jonathan's giving me a thumbs up. Awesome. I'm going to check the chat room. If you don't want to pop on the mic, feel free to just type into the chat. Anthony said, gorgeous. Can't wait to wrap my hands around the full deck. Yes, we can't wait to get those to you either. We're really excited. Thank you, Anthony. Any questions regarding the Nicolas Conver deck, or anything really about these cards? I couldn't have covered all of it. This is good. So we've got some questions coming. Christine says that she's quite new to the Marseille decks. Why is the death card not named? And Marilyn, you might want to pop in here. So we've got Marilyn here from Tarot Clarity. She's got a wonderful YouTube channel where she teaches the tarot, and we've talked, a lot about this. And I think she's got some great perspectives on this. So I'm actually going to share my screen with her, if that's okay with you. Give me a thumbs up if that's okay, Marilyn. Kind of putting her on the spot, but she is our resident historian here. I just ask you to unmute, and we'll just kind of have a chat. You're still muted. You're still muted here. You're still muted. I'm going to click ask to unmute again. So
okay, my bad.
There you go. So I'm going to get a drink of water really quickly.
Okay.
So yeah, why would they?
So the death card
might not name the death card.
Right. I don't. I'm not necessarily right. But my thought on this was that if it's unnamed, then you don't give it power. And let's face it. A lot of these people, when death really represented death, they had things to deal with, like the bubonic plague, and they had this card in their deck that was like pretty much on their minds, in real life. And I think by giving it a name, they gave it power. So, by keeping it unnamed, they took away its power. It wasn't, a deck that was created originally for divination or anything, but I all these cards have a link to antiquity, right? And maybe, I mean, even the Visconti Sforza decks, although they had the death card, they didn't have things like the tower. The tower is like mysteriously missing from their decks, so maybe if something was unpleasant, they either eliminated it or they didn't give it a name. That's just my thought.
And I think it's also interesting because if you go back in time and you look at like the Dodol deck, for example, you can see that the death card, or card 13, I guess we kind of refer that as the card with no name, is also the card with no name. It doesn't have a name on it either. And it's also facing the same direction. But if you go back in time to 1650, you can see that actually the death card now does have a name. It's La Morte, that's now facing the other direction. It's facing to the left. And so it's interesting how the Noblet deck, it is named. And then the Dodol deck, it isn't named, and it's facing to the right. And then the Conver deck, it's also facing to the right. And so it's interesting how different variations or different editions of this deck, depending on the year, has made changes in the cards. And so you can still see the same elements, they're all there, but maybe it's going the wrong way. Maybe it is named, and there are some differences. And I think that's
and one of the differences too is that, they go in the same direction, but some death and fool cards, they actually confront one another.
And actually hold that up for just another minute, because I think, when we said a lot of these elements are very similar to one another, you can see where the death card is now moving off to the right. The fool card is also moving off to the right. And if you look at them, they almost look as if they could be the same character. And that's why I think that this deck, one of the reasons why it's easier to work with is because you can start to see those similarities between the two. So maybe the fool becomes card 13, and if they were reversed in order, then the death card, maybe he's starting a new, he's had to cut out some things in his life and he's starting a new adventure, right, as the fool. And so depending on how these cards line up in a spread, it really changes how you can view those. But I think it's very easy to assume with those two cards that one character becomes another character. And so that's one of the reasons why I love reading with these. So that's a great question. Do you have any thoughts on that, Marilyn?
No, you covered it.
Okay. I guess I'm just asking about the similar elements that are found within.
Yeah, no, they share a lot of features, the pole, the stick with, well, one with the scythe and the other one with his cane, their bodies bent. Yeah, they even their leg postures is very similar.
Yeah.
So yeah, they share a lot in common.
So Ambrose just asked, I'm curious why you call it a restoration when it seems like we've made our own version inspired by the Conver. Yeah, so that's a good question because, I like to call this a restoration because there are so many different editions of this deck. Like, for example, this card, some editions, it actually is not colored. It's a different color in this area. And so what we've done is we've tried to basically compile a lot of the different Conver decks and base it on the 1760 deck. And so any changes that we've made are more revisions. And so the card, I think anybody that looks at this card immediately knows that this is a Conver deck. And if we were to call it something else, I think people would say, well, that's just the Conver. That's just the Conver deck. Why are you calling it something else? And so because of that, that was our basis for this deck, that's why we're calling it a restoration. And also in our Kickstarter, we also call it a revision because we've revised, a lot of the elements that are within these cards. Yeah. And it's actually interesting you say that because on this deck, we've made a lot of changes like that, but we're working on a few more decks, and we stayed a little bit more truer to those decks when restoring them. And there are some reasons. For example, with the Conver deck, the lines are very clear. And so you can very easily make updates and you can make changes to this because I'll spotlight you here. because those lines are so clear, you can very easily say, okay, this should be like this. We probably think this should be this. But when you go back in time, look at Dodal or look at Noble, it's a little bit more messy. And so instead of trying to go through and fix everything from Noble and Dodal and other decks that we're working on, we decided to leave those closer to the originals. But with this deck, because there's so many different restorations out there, we said our goal with this deck is to make it as refined and as clean as possible with still keeping all of the images as close to Conver as we can. So hopefully that makes sense, Ambrose. If you have any questions on that, let us know. Yes, thank you. Yeah, good. So I think this could be a revision of the Nicolas Conver Tarot, could be an updated version of the Nicolas Conver Tarot. But I think most people just, when you hear restoration, they know that it's going to be restored, and there's some possible differences as well.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
How many, or maybe you don't want me to ask this question, but from the the preview deck that we got, have there been many changes from that?
As you know, for example, on the swords where it goes alternates the yellow, red, yellow, red,
yes,
yellow, red.
yes.
So we've changed that. The sword is actually upside down in the deck that you've received, and we've righted that. The bowl, as you know, on the page, or the hat, the bowl hat on the, what is that? The page of cups. So we've changed that from the previous one to this one. We're also going to change the Pope. We're going to, I think, make both of their throws that are over their body. We're going to make those yellow. And I think it's yellow and a different color in the one that you have. Just because if you go back in time and look at Dodal, look at Noble, they're both the same color. And so we're saying, let's make these both the same color so that stays in line with the tradition. And so once again, Ambrose, when we're doing this, we're also thinking historical, maybe with these two decks, they were colored this way, but the next edition of this deck, they were colored a different way because that's the paint that they had on hand. And so I think it's safe to assume that per, different variations or editions of the Conver, even printed in the 1760s, the 1800s, the 1880s, all of these, they've got different colors because of what they had available to them at the time. And so I think that's why we feel comfortable at least changing those colors to once again make more sense for your eyes. Yes, so actually this is a really good point. Christine says, how do you interpret the facial expressions of humans on the deck, especially when some of the old ones were not clear? I see quite different facial expressions across the restored Conver decks. This is a great question. Actually, I'm going to pull back my, if it's still open. It's not. Just a moment. I've got to open this up again. Because this is actually a good question that I didn't even make a point to point out. Just a moment. Where is a good example? Okay, this is a great example. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of you, share my screen. Where would that be? Oh, the joys of Zoom, not being able to find the screen you want to share. One moment, let me see if it pops up this time. Aha, here we go. So here are the faces of the different cards. So you can see here in the original, we've got this kind of like somber thinking type of face. And we've tried to keep this as true as we could to the original. So if, for example, in this original edition, if we couldn't see the face, we'd try to find another one and try to find another one and try to find another one until this was very clear. And you can see there's even some differences in ours versus this one. Her lips are a little bit thicker, a little bit larger. Here's, we made them just a little bit more slimmed down. But for the most part, this face is the same. Now, if you go to CBD, what he decided, he said, well, you know, in the CBD deck, the facial expressions are a little bit more somber. Nobody really looks happy in these cards. So what we've decided to do is change their faces and make them a little bit more friendly for when you're reading with them, so people can relate a little bit better with the cards. But I think when you start doing that, you're also changing the meanings of these cards, because here she looks like she's deep in thought. She's thinking about something instead of reading her book, right? Or maybe her book is what's on her mind and she's thinking about what she just read, right? But you can see she's really deep in thought and concentration. And here she's sitting and she looks like she's more happy about something. Right, so just by looking at these faces, you can see the differences and what kind of readings you might get from these cards. And then that's the same here with this deck, with the Jodorowsky deck. You can see he pretty much kept that facial expressions the same as to the original as well. And so the CBD deck, you know, one of the things, if you would prefer more friendly faces, then that might be the deck for you, because he did change the majority of the faces in this deck. What we try to do is we try to keep that. You can see here's the Hermit, which is pretty much the same across the board. Let me go to the World is another example. You can see here you can't really make out her face. It's kind of messed up, and it's kind of messed up like this on every edition we could find. I mean, there's lots of little details going on here to cut out of that wood block. So what we've done is, you can see, let me see if I can zoom in. You can see here her eye, she's got a full eye here, then the eye is just a line in a circle. I mean, this is a lot of detail on such a small wood block. What we've done is we've added an actual eye here. And so now you can tell that she's looking this way, and you can see more of what's going on. So this would be a change that we made, because this, you know, we tried this first. Actually, if you look at our, I'll show you this when I stop sharing the screen. If you look at our majors only deck, we actually did take this approach. And we thought, something just isn't right here. And so that's when we determined to finish her face. And now just looking at it, she has this same type of look, but it just looks a lot more complete. And I'm actually going to show you the first edition that we have. So this is what if this will focus. Let's see if we can. Here we go. So that was the majors only deck. And it doesn't look bad, but it looks like there might be something missing there, which is why, once again, we decided to add that and give her that full eye. She seems to have a raised eyebrow. On CBD, she could be smizing. Yeah, and so once again, CBD put in just a little bit friendlier faces across all of those images to make them a little bit more friendly. And we didn't want to do that, because we believe that does change how you read the cards. And once again, because this is a restoration, we didn't want to change how the cards are read. We just wanted to be a little bit more consistent and a little bit more refined for when you're looking at these cards. Hopefully that makes sense as far as I don't know if I answered your question or not, but hopefully, we went into details about, why we decided to take the direction that we decided to go in. Okay, so Ambrose says she would like to know what was the inspiration for this project. So I am a performer. I perform a lot on stage. And one of the things that I do is I do tarot readings during my show. And I was used to the Jodorowsky deck. I was used to the CBD deck. I was used to, some facsimile editions. And I personally, how I was reading them, I didn't necessarily care for some of the way that they were colored, how their faces were. I didn't want that really old style looking deck. I wanted something that looked modern, fresh, and really clean for when I'm reading these for my show. And so at that point, I said, okay, I'm just going to work with someone. I found Kristen, who actually she's got a master's degree in product design. She's a pro. And so I teamed up with her and I said, hey, I really want to make a majors only deck with these cards. And I want to use them in my shows. Like, this is specifically for me, for my shows. And as we started working on them, refining the images, learning more about the cards, because we spent so much time on these cards, we really fell in love with those images even more. And so we started putting in these little details that you see and started refining it more and started asking questions like, well, what is this and what is this? And we started having a lot of fun with this restoration. And then when we released it, just everyone really, really loved them. And the reason we released it is because, quite frankly, it's expensive to release your own deck of cards. It's quite expensive. And so to make up for some of that cost, we decided to make these available for the public and just to see if anyone else would like what we're doing. And we printed, I don't even know how many we've sold at this point. Let me do some math. Hold on a minute. So we've sold around 375 copies of just the majors only deck. And it's actually more than that because I still have them sitting here and I haven't done all the math. But I would say around 375 decks we've sold of just the majors only. And I thought, wow, if people are liking our majors only deck, then let's do a full deck. And we would get comments all the time on Instagram, on email. Hey, when are you going to do the full deck? When are you going to do the full deck? We love your majors. And so that's then when we took it upon ourselves to finish the deck out, which also took another year to do because of all of these little details. Also, another note, Ambrose, is the card stock. The card stock is very, very important to me, especially if I'm in a show and I want to spread the cards, I want to talk about the cards. Sometimes when you get the new writer decks and you get it out of the box and you go to spread them, they all stick together and it's really hard to display them or to show them. And so you spread them on the table and it's like they go in clumps. And so that's why we went with this high quality linen finish, is because when you take these cards and you spread them, or you want to riffle shuffle them, we're using a 310 GSM, so it is bendy, which makes it very easy to riffle shuffle. It makes them very easy to have in your hand and to hold and to use. And I don't know of any other Tarot de Marseille decks that have this beautiful linen finish, that are easy to spread, that have this thinner cardstock that makes it easy to riffle shuffle. And just for that alone, it's worth me, restoring this deck and having these cards, because these will last for such a long time, and it will allow me to, when I'm doing my my readings on stage, it will just allow everything to go more smoothly and last a while. And so these are real workhouse decks. Like I said, I used my other one for 2.5 years and it's still going strong. And so because of that, is another reason why I decided to create our own deck. So Evelyn says it's going to be such fun to compare both decks up close. Yeah. And actually Marilyn, she's got a very large collection of all these different editions. And in her channel, on her YouTube channel. If you're still here, Marilyn, feel free to
I
post
am.
that. Do you have that
I,
YouTube video handy where you were comparing the different decks?
um, hold on. I somehow I got lost.
Oh,
I was doing something on my phone. I'm sorry.
do you have
Which,
videos where you go through the different editions and you show some differences?
yes,
Could you find that video for us and post it in our chat room?
I will. Which one is it? It's the Conver and yours.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and actually in this Zoom chat room, because someone's asking about that, if you could post that video and then we can show off your YouTube channel.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and you
Now,
can actually,
I, 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 I'm afraid that maybe I'll get disconnected from you guys. So,
okay, well, let's do this. We actually have a Discord chat room, and why don't you just post that in
okay.
there whenever you've got a few minutes, because she does go through the cards and she compares them and talks about the differences, and it's really informative. So we have a chat room. I'm going to link this right here. So this link to the chat room is linked
Okay.
to our chat. And so if you're already a member of that, hello. If not, click that link. We use a platform called Discord, and that allows us to basically talk like we're talking now. Either we can call each other, we can have Zoom conferences, we can also just chit chat about Tarot de Marseille, which I think we're all interested in who's here. So click that link, join us. We've got like 160 people in that chat room. And if you've got questions about the deck, questions about interpretations, questions about, Marilyn just shared a video where she talks about reading online and how she does that. And so we've got a lot of people in here that are willing to, talk about the tarot and help everyone out. So it's a really great community that we're building to really talk about the tarot. And if you have any questions, actually, I'll show you this really quickly. So if you're new to this, I'm going to share my Discord screen really quickly. So this is Discord. This is the chat room that we use. So when you log into this, you're going to be automatically put into the new members area. And you can just see someone just showed up right now. So I'll say hi to them. We've got an introduce yourself area where you can talk a little bit about yourself and we can get to know you. We've got this general chat area where I posted about our upcoming Zoom social. We actually had on our Kickstarter, somebody pulled out of the complete package, the early bird. So I said, hey, someone just pulled out of the early bird package that's available. We've got one if you want to save money. So that's in this area. We've got a tarot area where you can talk about, different editions. Like Leah just posted about this Taschen book all about the tarot, which is really fascinating. And then we have a little promotion area where we talk about whatever we've got going on in our store, or if someone has, like Marilyn has a new YouTube video come out, she can post this here and talk about what's going on. And so we've got these 4 areas right now where you can chit chat. So Abe just popped in, so I'll say hi to Abe. One note really quickly, if you want to say hi to someone, you just say welcome, then you put the @ sign. And if I want to say hi to Garmonbozia, I butchered your name, you would just say @Gar, and you can see this person right here. I select them, and now I can say and @Abe. Welcome. And now when I click enter, they're now going to be notified on their phone that they just got a message. So if you're wanting to talk to someone specifically, you can just say, hey, @whatever. And then you can have a conversation with that person. So this is a really cool tool to start chit-chatting and talking about the tarot. So I just wanted to show you how that works. It's for your phone and it's for your desktop. Cool. And Marilyn just posted right now that link in our chat room when she's comparing our decks with the other decks. And actually, I'll do this right here. I'm going to go to general chat. I'm going to say, hey, Marilyn just posted about the video that we talked about in our social. And then I do this, and now everybody can see it pops up right here, and you can watch her talk about the different editions of the deck. So later on, click that link, and you can watch her talk about this. So it's a really cool place where we can just stay in touch with one another all the time. So, okay, we're back. Any questions about the cards, the chat room, anything that our Kickstarter, really anything at all? I'm an open book, whatever you all want to talk about. And did that answer your question, Marilyn? Some of the differences. Yeah, so we've got some differences they're minor, but yeah, there are going to be some. Yeah. Any other questions? And feel free to unmute yourself if you just want to ask. And while I wait here, I'm going to get a drink of water.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, on the Kickstarter, what is the proposed timeline? I know that I think it says December. Just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so we're really hoping to get it out earlier than that, but because of the pandemic, there's probably going to be all sorts of delays. And so I think a reasonable, like, I'm a little more conservative than I am because I don't want to say, hey, we're going to get it to you this month and then we don't. And so December is really us being conservative. We've already got the decks printed. They're all ready to go. We've already made the changes that we're going to make in the deck. All of those are ready to go. We just need Kickstarter to release those funds to us, and that will take up to 30 days for them to release those funds to us. And then once we have the funds, we can go directly to the printer, and then the printer will take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how many cards we print. It'll take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks for them to print them, and then they have to be delivered to us. So pretty much you're looking at 2 to 2.5 months from the end of our Kickstarter, which is in July. So now you're into July, August, September. And if everything goes right, hopefully we can have these in hand by October. But as we know, the pandemic has caused all sorts of issues, and who knows if this other variant is going to come back and make things difficult on us again. And so also the cotton cloths that are on our Kickstarter, we've already have them ready to be manufactured. Kristen will hopefully get the samples in the next week or two, so we can just make sure everything is as they should be, and then those will be ready to go. The wooden box, Eric is working on them right now. And so we hopefully by the time in October, we'll have those. Then the magnets, the buttons, and the postcards, those are all ready to go too. And so basically we just need that money to be released to us. Then we need to get them to the manufacturers. And then it depends on the turnaround time for the manufacturers and how long it will take Eric to complete, because all of those wooden boxes are all handmade. He's got a beautiful studio where we work, and in that area, like, he's got to make 50 boxes right now, all by hand. And so hopefully in about 2 months time, he'll be able to get those out. So, our goal is October, November, but a conservative estimate, just because I would much rather be conservative, would be December.
Yeah,
But it shouldn't be after that, because like I said, everything is ready to go. It's just a matter of manufacturing time, shipping to us, and then getting those out to all of you. And so that's, once again, because of the mail, I've had packages take up to 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just because the mail system is so slow right now. I sent something to St. Louis, and a month and a half later, it never showed up. It was lost. Yet I can ship something to Australia and it got there before it even got to St. Louis. And it's like, well, why? It doesn't make any sense. But that's just the state of the world right now. So hopefully, this is a long answer. Hopefully October, November is a real time frame, but the conservative time frame is December.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I know that was a long answer, but that's where we are right now. So like I said, everything's good to go. We just kind of, we wait and we wait and we wait, which is kind of how life works.
It's gonna be torture.
Yeah. I am the, pretty much the Popus, just sitting here, waiting for everything to happen, reading my book, not much else we can do. But that's actually not true. Whenever we are waiting, like I said, we do have some decks that we're working on. Yeah. Do you want to see a sneak peek?
Yes, that was a sneaky eye look. We want to see.
All right, I'm actually going to end because I don't want this out here. So I'm going to. All right, thank you for joining us, everyone. If you made it to the live stream, we're going to stay here, but I'm going to cut this off on our Facebook group. So let me see if I can stop the live stream. Here we go. So thank you if you're on our live stream on our Facebook group. Otherwise, we'll see you right here, people in our live Zoom feed. Okay, so we should be, I just don't want this recorded up anywhere. So I'm gonna just show you a sneak peek here of one of our cards. Let me go to, I've got so many folders going on. Oh, this would be here, here. So I will show you, I think this will be the Fool from our next deck. And what's going to be fun about this next deck is it's going to be bridge size. So you've got the tarot size cards, which are quite large. And this is going to be bridge size, which is about the size of a business card. So it's going to be this. So this is a business card size. It's a little bit wider than a business card size, but you can see the difference between this and the tarot. So it's going to be a little bit wider than this. And it's going to, so then that's bridge size, same card stock, same companies printing them. So everything will be the same in that regard, but they're going to be little guys. That's great to like slip into your pocket. And so I'm going to share my screen. And this is what this is going to look like. Can everybody see this? Is that a yes?
Yes.
So here we have the Fool from Noble. So this is going to be our next thing that we're working on. And this is going to probably be, I mean, it's going to be a while because once again, this is a long process, but you know, behind the scenes, we're always working on something. So here we have the Fool, and here we have the Magician from this deck. What's interesting with this deck, the wand is actually, this is actually broken on the wood block. So Kristen's completely redrawn the wand, redrawn the hand, changed the thumb shape just a little bit so it's not so fat. But there are some little changes that we've made once again with this card, but not as much as in the Conver deck. And then here we have, the Pope, who's quite beautiful in my opinion. And once again, we changed the colors of the row. I mean, we did very similar changes to this as we did the Conver. But we also, like, her hand is kind of messed up. We didn't fix that. We left that. That's the same thing with the Magician's hand. This hand is smaller. This hand is quite big. We didn't change any of these types of things. We did change, I think, the color of his dingle dangle to be more in line with with the rest of his body. But you know, if someone would have told me I'd be working on a cartoon figures, you know what, I probably would have said I wouldn't have believed you. So it's kind of fun. Yeah. So this is going to be the next thing that we work on, and it's going to be once again that bridge size card. So here we have the Empress from that deck. And so you can see that the cards are very similar to the Conver, but the drawings are much more rudimentary in how they're portrayed. So does that hopefully show you what we're working on?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks interesting. Can't wait.
Yeah, so here we have the Emperor. And you can see what's interesting about this. So this is from 1650. The Emperor is facing the other direction. So instead of looking towards the left, this is mirrored and he's looking towards the right. But you can see his scepter is very similar with the cross. His hat is very similar. He's got the same similar beard. And this is 1650 and the Conver is 1760. And so you can see in about 100 years' time, some of the changes that were made from this deck to the Conver deck. And so this is part of the thing that we're doing is we're looking at all of these, you know, all the history and trying to figure out what's going on within these images. So we'll go here. What do we have? Aha, the Pope. And actually, Marilyn, we were just talking about that. You can see how this is yellow and this is yellow, and that's per the original. And so the Conver, this kind of, you can see the hand got here, the hands are here. And the Conver, this all got muddied. It really got muddled up.
Yeah.
And so going back in time and looking at the Noble, you can see, okay, there are two hands here and there's two hands here and there's no weird thing coming out here. Like Jodorowsky says, there's a little toy, you know, in this area. which there may or may not be, right, depending on how you look at it. But just going back in time, looking at the historic decks, you can see that these lines are much easier to follow. And so when you have like a woodcut based off a woodcut basis of a woodcut, you sometimes lose some of those details, and you can see that in the cards as you progress within those years.
Beautiful. The taupe is beautiful.
So this is what we've been working on, what Kristen's been working on. I just say, oh, that looks good, and she does her thing. But yeah, and also you can see the cherub's different, right? He's facing the opposite direction here.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have the satchel, and he's blindfolded, right? And so I think this also, you know, and in the Conver, he's not blindfolded. And they say love is blind, right? And so I think this card can really reflect that type of reading, if you'd like it to reflect that. And so there's differences like this from this 1650 deck versus the deck in 1760. And this is like, once again, you can see the flowers in her hair with the little red, right? In the Conver, these kind of get lost within her hair. And you go, are those the flowers? I don't know what they are. Well, looking back in time, yeah, there's definitely flowers in her hair. And since we know the Conver deck is based off of this deck, then it's very safe to assume that those are flowers in her hair. And so that's once again why we call this a restoration, is because we're trying to go back and figure out, oh, those little shapes that kind of look like flowers probably were intended to be flowers. Let's make them flowers. Yeah. So that is our next project. Yeah. Did you make Dr. J's cards? If so, is there going to be a full deck? I'm not sure what Dr. J's cards. Oh, I think Dr. Jeremy. No, we did not make Dr. Jeremy's cards. That he did all of that himself. And I'm not sure if there's going to be a full deck of that or not. We have not, you know, he's talked about, so Dr. Jeremy, a friend of mine, he's got a different style of cards, and he just did the majors, and I'm not sure if there's going to be a full deck on that or not. But the Noble, we are planning on a full deck of those cards. So that's what we're working on. And then we're also working on another deck as well. So we've got 3 or 4 decks in the pipeline. So yeah, so we really appreciate our Kickstarter being so successful, and people like you know, spreading the word about it, because, you know, the more money that we can bring in, the more decks that we can print, which will give us that stock. Also, it'll help us continue restoring these cards and have that income flow that we need to be able to do what we love doing, which is learn, study, read, restore, do everything tarot. Yeah. So Abe says, I appreciate and love your card stock. I assume some of this comes from your performing conjuring background. Yeah, exactly. So I'm also a magician. So when I talked about, you know, performing, I'm a magician as well. And so that's why that playing card stock is like, I know so much about it, because, you know, all of these different companies create, this is a crushed finish, this is a linen finish, this is air cushion finish, this is, right? And so because of that background, I've got a huge collection of cards, and I'm able to feel and know all of these different thicknesses and weights. And because of that, that's why we selected Shuffled Ink to go with, and why we went with this particular card stock. But actually it's interesting, because I noticed that tarot readers and magicians have something in common. They both are very particular with their card stock. And so it's funny, because I'll watch a magic video and they'll be like, okay, this is a deck review of these cards, and this has a crushed linen finish and the thickness of, right? And then I go to the tarot readers and I see them, oh, look, if I do this, this is how much it bends, and this is a 310 GSM, and oh, I really like the linen finish, and look how easy I can riffle, and like just the majors, right? You can see how well they bend to do your, oops, I'm losing cards, to do your riffle shuffle. And so it's just funny watching the tarot readers talk the same language as the magicians. And some of them go, oh, these are too thin, this is a 310. I much prefer a 400 card stock, a 400 GSM. So they're stiff like cardboard. And so it's really interesting to see all of these different tarot readers who are also very particular about the card stock that they have with their decks. And for some reason, Marilyn, you might agree with this, but I've found, like, on a lot of the Kickstarters, they say, oh, we've got 310 GSM, but our stretch goal is if we make X amount of dollars, we'll upgrade it to a 210 GSM. And so it's like one of their stretch goals is a thicker cardstock. And I think that's really interesting because in our case, I prefer this thinner cardstock because you can't, if I do this to the card, right, it's still perfectly fine. There's no creases, there's no problem. And so I think this is a workhorse of a deck because of that. So it's interesting when I see on Kickstarter, some people say like, oh, we're going to make it a thicker and thicker and thicker cardstock as we reach our stretch goals. And that's always been, curious. I've always thought that was curious. So Abe says, I appreciate all your knowledge. I also have lots of decks and enjoy a certain quality of cards, although he's very flexible using decks. Yeah. And my thing is when I take them out of the box, I want to be able to spread them. I don't want them to be lumps. Yeah, this is not my preference.
I think it's the linen finish, that is really special.
Yeah.
I love the linen finish.
And I don't know why more decks don't use a linen finish. Like I
don't either.
It is, and that's one of the reason why our deck costs more is because we're printing in the US. So that raises the cost, the price of the deck. And then we've got, we could have just done 310 GSM, but then the linen finish also adds the cost to the deck. And so when you start doing these things, just the price of the deck, goes up. Yeah. And so I think maybe that's why some of the people creating the decks, why they don't go with the linen finish is because of that additional cost. Yeah. Any other questions here? We've got some more time, and I'm happy to chit chat and talk about whatever you want to. And now we're talking in secret because we're not on Facebook.
I have to sign out myself. But
Thank you for joining us. And once again, we put your video in the chat room. So
yeah, that's fine. I'm happy that you're interested.
Yeah, of course.
Stay well.
See you soon, Marilyn.
Good night.
Does anyone else have any thoughts, any questions, comments?
I'm sure I'll have more. I'll join on the Discord later.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, more, I try to be on there a few times. I'm not on there all the time, but I do try to check that, a couple times a day just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Cool.
So I'm really curious as far as I've got a question for all of you. As far as reading goes, as far as reading the cards, I'm really curious to know what type of resources you use in order to learn how to read the Tarot de Marseille. If I could ask you a question now, I'm just really curious what books or who you follow, who's popular for you to learn how to read with these cards, or is it more of an intuition where you just look at the cards? Yeah, Jonathan.
For me, it was Enrique Enriquez, the poetry of the visuals, and all you have to do is say what you're looking at, and then people fill in the meaning of the context. So they're bringing the reading with them. You don't have to do a thing. That took so much pressure off. It is so simple. You're not even really doing anything. It feels like cheating, and it's awesome. So that's kind of how I approach doing a lot of the college gigs that I do, even over Zoom. So with just the cards and 3 hours, I can just talk nonstop. Don't even need to have somebody on video like this. I just have the Google form that the people have filled out. Then the spreadsheet is on another screen, so I can just go through the questions on one screen. They can use a code name to stay anonymous, and voila, we're sitting here talking and be like, oh yeah, so this is your card, and then okay, so check this out, and then we talk through it, and then so I hope that makes sense. So we're having a whole conversation, and I'm not saying anything.
Could you give us an example reading? I'd love to see that.
Sure. What do you want to know about? What do you want to know about? What Genie rules is that it has to be about you. It can't be about somebody else. Like, why is my sister such a pain in the butt? It would be something that you might like flip a coin about to just have some clarity, some outside perspective. So yeah, what would you like to know?
Let's talk about the Kickstarter since that's topical right now. Uh, will everything go smoothly, or will we run into some problems during the I guess delivery shipment phases of our Kickstarter?
Got it. So the delivery and potential hiccups that would come along with doing something so ambitious as this Kickstarter for supporters all over the world, and what problems are on the horizon. All right, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that kind of mojo into the cards as I mix them up, and to me this kind of represents the chaos of reality, the tumble of life. But then you can make a decision and cut through all the chaos and make order. So we cut the cards, and that top card is yours, which today is the Hanged Man. Now, the first thing I notice about this is that he's not being hung. It's not that kind of being hanged, but he's hanging upside down, which can be very uncomfortable. So it might be pointing to a challenge or a problem, but then this guy is looking at it from a completely different perspective. So if you're asking about problems, those are actually opportunities and challenges that could lead to more connection, but it's being willing to be in an uncomfortable position that allows you an uncommon perspective that nobody in their right mind would do on their own. So, if there are problems, just kind of flip it, turn that frown upside down, and that's the story of the Hanged Man for you. So hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, we'll move on from there.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and actually, can you hold that card back up for a moment? I just want to mention a few details here with it. If you look at the rope, you can see that the rope isn't actually tied around his ankle. It's actually just kind of like a loose, like a. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jonathan? Like
Like a
it's
lariat, it's not a knot. It's a closed loop that his foot is kind of in, but not bound by.
exactly, exactly. And so also just from a historical side, if you were a traitor, this would be your punishment. You'd be taken outside of the city and hung upside down, and everybody would know that you're a traitor. So a little bit of history about this card. Also, what's interesting about this card is his legs form the number four, which is the emperor from the deck. Which is interesting that the hangman, who could be considered a traitor, is in the same position with his legs as the king, right? So you can start to see some relation between those two cards. And also, there was one more note, just a perspective thing. I was actually talking to Dr. Jeremy about this, and he said, whenever you're turned upside down, yes, it changes your perspective, but at the same time, all of the blood rushes to your head. And when you think about that literally, your perspective change and all of your blood rushes to your head. And I think that's really interesting, an interesting thing to point out when looking at this card. Okay, you can relax for a moment. But I think there's several different ways to read this, right? You can first just look at the picture and you can see, oh, he's turned upside down. What might that mean? And then you can think, and this is a Jodorowsky strategy, is to become the card. So if you're the hangman, maybe hang yourself off the end of your bed. Imagine you're the hangman, and what do you feel? What do you sense? And that would be, well, all the blood is running to my head. I'm becoming dizzy. I'm becoming, I'm becoming different because of this blood rushing to my head. And so just by acting out the cards or naming the element in the cards or noticing these little details to mention those things to a sitter provides a little bit of clarity in that reading. And then also, if you can know a little bit about the history of the card, you're able to put that into it if so inclined. But just having many different layers of reading these cards just gives that flavor. And so I think that's why it's important to try to learn as much as you can, because it'll just make your readings that much stronger and that much more powerful. Especially, for example, just noticing that the hangman has his legs, he's upside down, and that makes the four, which is the same as the emperor's when he's crossing his legs and making that 4. And so, well, what might that mean? Well, if it's a traitor, then he's a traitor to, the king. And isn't that an interesting thing to just note with the deck? So maybe if those 2 cards come out, you can notice, oh, look, both of their legs are crossed, which means this and this in the spread. Maybe it's the same person, or maybe this is, someone within this person's kingdom, and that's what signifies that. And so just like looking at these, pointing out, as you said, these details are what's going to make you a much better reader, in my opinion.
Yeah, every once in a while, if I happen by some means to know what the card is while it's face down, I'll ask them, you can put your hand on it, and what pictures, feelings, thoughts, words, what comes to your head? Then they'll, besides being curious about what it is or being nervous, oh, what's it going to mean? So past that, what's coming through, then they'll say whatever. Well, they've just done their own reading. And then you just go, well, the card that is usually closest tied to that is this card, but you don't say it's that card. You just kind of go, it's this card, and here's the picture, and here's why, and the connections, and you're just making the meaning up to connect with what they said. So if there's anything to this stuff, that'd probably be the card that picks you. If it's not, that's totally cool. We'll work with what it is, but I got a good feeling about it. You turn it over, and that's the card. You're just like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy, this is super weird. And then
I
it's
think
just
I'll do
a
that.
nice.
And I think I'll do that a lot in my show. I'll say there's a card that I see floating above your head, and this is what it is, right? Or even if someone says, "Oh, this is the problem that I'm having," and instead of saying, "Okay, we're going to do a spread," you go, "Oh, that's really interesting," because when I think about you having to make a decision, I think about the chariot. Now the 2 horses are going in opposite directions. And it's as if that chariot, if he continues on the path, the horses are going to tear apart that chariot. So do you see how this card relates to you? Okay, now, and then I'll continue in with right? And I don't even need the deck of cards, because at this point, I can just describe a card that is associated with them and the problem that they're having, and then give them advice or give them agency, give them something empowering just based on that conversation. And so I think, because I've worked on these for so long, and probably you have too, and maybe a lot of people here, once these cards are in your head, you don't even need the cards. Because if you say, hey, do you have a question? Oh, that reminds me of one time I laid down a spread of these 3 cards. It was the Tower, and then it was the World. It was only a 2-card reading. But, this told me that with the Tower, there was some destruction, something happening. But then the World, which shows this transition. And to me, this tells you that there's better things ahead. Right? This is just a period of transformation for you. And if you look at the people, in the Tower, there's 2 people that look like they're falling, but when you pay more attention to them, they're really doing cartwheels. So this isn't a time to be sad. This is really a time to celebrate, even though it doesn't feel like that, because this is a time of transition for you. And the only way we can grow is to, have sometimes painful experiences in our lives that make us become who we are. And so just by giving a reading like that, I didn't show you cards. I didn't do anything. I just said, this reminds me of these 2 things. And this is why this reminds me of that. Does that, help you with what you're going through? And really,
So
once
handy.
again, I think the cards are here just to make that connection with the people that you're reading for. And because of that, not that the cards are unimportant, because I think they kind of give you clout as a reader, right? Because you lay down the cards and, oh, this is what I'm seeing, and this is why I see this for you. And so I think these do help with that, but also just having a conversation with people based on, the language of images, I think is really powerful. And so a lot of times I'll have these cards in my head, and I can just give readings, or I can, I could describe a person or a situation, because this deck, every single card in this deck shows the human condition, right? And I think also, just as a side note, I think that's why people like going to different readers, because they want to hear different perspectives from different people. Because, they say that the tarot is just a mirror. When you look at these cards, you just see a reflection of yourself. And what does that mean? It means that the experiences that we have in life, colors biases how we see this image. And since everybody has different life experiences, they might look at the hermit and they might think of a time when they were really by themselves. Or they might think of a time with COVID, like everybody's experienced that. That's something that we've all experienced. But maybe some people are more introverts. They feel more alone, they feel more like themselves when they're by themselves. Other people might look at this and they go, oh, being alone is the most awful thing. What an awful card. He's all by himself. But just because someone's an extrovert versus an introvert, they might read this card differently. And I think that's why, once again, people like going to different readers. They like hearing other people's perspectives because of that. And once again, I think as readers, it's okay to put our own experiences within those cards, because I think, once again, those people are wanting to have a conversation with us based off of our own experiences. Yeah, and that's why, too, I'm going off on a rant here, but that's why, too, I think a lot of young readers, if you're 18 years old, 16 years old, I think it's hard because they haven't had a lot of life experiences. Whereas we get older, we begin to understand life better. We understand, the wheel of fortune, right? This cycle that spins in our lives. And, I just went through a breakup, and because of that, I now look at certain cards differently. Or if something happens in my life, suddenly that shifts my own perspective on how I view the cards. Like the Lover, you think, oh, that's a good card. That's a lover. Oh, no, that's an awful card. It's someone trying to make a choice between two individuals. What an awful card, right? But that's my perspective because of something that's now happened in my life. Where someone else might look at that card and they might say, oh, no, it's a mother giving her son to be married, right? But depending on your experiences, you're gonna see that in different ways. And depending on the questions, I think you're gonna see that in different ways.
Yeah, super awesome.
Okay, I'll be off
my Grubhub is just showing up, so I'm gonna hop off of here, dude. Great to see you. Hello.
Good to see you. Thanks
everybody.
for joining us.
Bye.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up since we've gone like an hour and a half here. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we've talked about? Any thoughts, comments? Agree with me? Don't agree with me?